Welcome to another Logitech G Roundtable. My name is Friskk. I am a host, commentator, voice actress, just creator, overall creator, and I do so many other things. Today, we are going to be discussing representation in gaming, our experiences as women in the gaming space, and what can be done to make it a more diverse and inclusive place to be. Today, I am joined by three wonderful women in the gaming industry, MiaByte, DynamicReactions, and Pikachulita. MiaByte, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Mia, otherwise known as MiaByte, all across the different social medias. I'm a content creator. I do a lot of voice acting meme TikToks. I'm a variety streamer, and I'm also the live content producer over at Gaming Magazine. So I host all the stuff over there. I host a podcast, and every 2 weeks we host a charity show that raises money for charities that benefit all kinds of things.
That's incredible. I love how you use your platform to help others. And it sounds like you do a lot of amazing things. Thank you so much for that intro. DynamicReactions, could you tell us a little bit more about what you do and the things that you care about?
Hi, I'm DynamicReactions. I'm a variety streamer and YouTube reactor, content creator. I'm also an accessibility advocate over at Playability and a community manager for Sisters of the Fog. On my stream, we talk about accessibility, how I play games as a disabled person, and we raise money for a lot of cool charities while having an awesome, positive, accepting community. So
that's amazing. I love your intro as well. It's very important to have that representation in the space. And then also people like you who are championing for things like that, accessibility as a disabled creator yourself. So thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
And then lastly, Pikachulita, tell us about what drives you and, what you're about.
I want to start off by saying that I think it's so cool that, there's so much overlap between us and what we do, while there's still being things individually that sort of make us unique amongst each other. And I love that. And I'm super excited to be here. So my name is Pikachulita, but you can call me Katie or Pika. My pronouns are she, her. I am a bisexual / pansexual Black woman content creator, digital content creator specifically. I have been streaming on Twitch since about 2014, fall of 2014. So kind of been doing this for a good while. I also, like the other two wonderful ladies on here, and you as well, Friskk, our lovely host, I do a good amount of charity fundraising, community mutual aid, things of that sort. Yeah, I kind of exist within this space to champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to create safe and fun spaces for marginalized folks of all kinds, from the back end, behind the scenes, to the sort of the front end of gaming, which for us is being content creators. We're sort of on those front lines, so pretty much top down, front to back, just all about trying to make those strides. Yeah.
Wow. Honestly, all three of you just giving these introductions is incredible. If there's one thing that I recognize here is that we are all just passionate women in this space, making room for other women, other marginalized groups, and, using our platforms for good. And, I think that this Logitech G Roundtable is such a great place to be, because it allows us to, tell our stories, tell the audience, just educate them really about these things that, are at the top of our mind, that are included in our content. So before we get into that discussion, I kind of wanted to have just a quick icebreaker. So if you could play one game for the rest of your life, what would it be and why? And I want to start off with DynamicReactions.
Oh, that's an easy one for me. The Sims, hands down. The Sims 2, to be specific.
The Sims 2? Oh my gosh.
Yes. So much chaos, so much drama, and like endless ways to like mess with your Sims. I'm a storytelling type of girl, so I like to cause drama. I like for Sims to have baby mamas and etc. So Sims 2. I could never get bored.
Oh, I love that so much. Yeah, The Sims is always so much fun with like just unlimited amounts of as much chaos as you want or as little chaos as you want. So I could see why you'd want to play that for like the rest of your life. Oh man. And then MiaByte, how about you? What game would you want to play for the rest of your life?
Oh, this is extremely difficult for me. I'd probably end up going with Final Fantasy XIV. There's literally so much you can do in that game, and I think I've barely scratched the surface. Final Fantasy VII is probably my favorite game of all time, and I love that series to death, but I don't think I could play that over and over and over again for the rest of time. But 14, I think there's so much content there that I'd probably play it until the end of my days and still not do everything. So yeah, I'd go with that.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. Yeah, Final Fantasy XIV has so much content, it's unreal. And as much as I love Final Fantasy VII myself as well, like I'm a huge Final Fantasy like nerd, it just does not have that replayability, unfortunately. Like the remastered or like the old one. So, and then Pika, which game would you want to play for the rest of your life?
So I'm gonna cheat and give you two because I couldn't pick one. If I had to pick a single player game, it would be surprise, Hades. If I had to pick a multiplayer game, it would probably be Splatoon 3. Because I'm obsessed with Hades. Everybody knows that. Every time I talk about anything, it's always Hades. I play it. So I've played it so much, and I keep like obviously going back to it. But eventually, like I'm going to technically run out of content with it. Unlike kind of their answers where it's like there's content steadily being released. So I'm like, do I just love it that much, or could I like genuinely keep playing it even after I've like cleared every single part of the game? Now I still have a ways off before I do that, but that's why I said Splatoon was my backup, because I never get tired of Salmon Run. Never.
I've only played a little bit of Splatoon, but it's such a fun little like just looking little game with all the little characters, and you're just like splatting everywhere. So super
unique.
cute. And then honestly, like Hades is a phenomenal game. Like it has so many different variants of just like every time you run that dungeon, you never know just generally what you're going to get and what you're going to run into. And dungeon crawlers like that just can be so much fun. Like things like Enter the Gungeon, Binding of Isaac, same thing, the random generator. It's like you never know what you're going to get. So,
well, what's your game then?
Oh yeah, that's right. My game. Oh,
can't forget about you, ma'am.
Oh, all right. Well, oh boy, that's a question. I would say the game that I'd want to play for the rest of my life might be honestly probably Enter the Gungeon. I love those dungeon crawler games, and I love Enter the Gungeon. I play it a lot offline. People don't see me play on stream. It's like my guilty pleasure, the thing that I play offline.
Yeah.
Where I play by myself. So always been a fan of dungeon crawlers. So but yeah, no, thank you so much for remembering to ask me, because I forgot to ask myself. All right. Well, we are about to get into our discussion about our experiences in the gaming space, representation, diversity, inclusiveness, for women in general in the gaming industry. So the first question I want to ask is, do you remember the first time that you felt like you saw yourself represented in a game? Who was the character and what was the game?
So I can say why this is difficult for me, because I don't think I've ever seen myself represented in a game. But in terms of like as who I am as a human being like a trans person, trans woman specifically, there's not many stories that have been told that actually share the experiences that I've been through in my life. I feel like possibly I think the game's called Tell Me Why It Gets Close, but I've not actually played that yet, so it's hard to say. But for me, yeah, I don't think I've ever actually seen myself represented within video games. And I think that's a little bit of a problem, but at the same time, it's like how generalized of an experience do we want to get to,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dynamic.
For me in particular, I said this in the Global Accessibility Day Roundtable as well. But I said Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart just because if you've played the game, spoiler alert for some people, Clank ends up losing his arm, and he goes through like this really cool storyline of self-acceptance and that he's okay without this arm and that he actually likes himself without his arm. It's very sweet and a very good example of disability representation, and I just really love it. So
it's a phenomenal game, by the way. That was my game of the year that year. I love Ratchet and Clank. Wonderful choice.
Yes.
And they've got some good accessibility settings too, actually.
Insane accessibility settings, yeah.
It's great. It's great. Well, and I definitely think that it's a testament that when we kind of get asked these sorts of questions, it's the reality of it is that there's, so many of us that truly haven't seen ourselves represented in games, or we have slim pickings. Even if there are a couple opportunities or, for us to sort of see ourselves, they're either very limited or, whereas we may be sort of part of one of that sort of demographic that like character or whatever, falls under, but then there may be some other caveat that's making us feel like we can't, identify with them. I would have to say for me, it would probably be Kaya Dark Lineage. It came out in, apparently 2003. It's an old game. It was on PS2. But the main character, her name is Kaya, and she's a black woman. She's a black girl, black teenage girl. And we kind of had like similar skin tones. Like, we didn't particularly have like a similar personality, but just sort of, I think that was like the first like game that I really saw a main character as a black woman, one that I had actually played at that age. Because, at that age, exposing myself here, I want to say like 9. So, back then we didn't have a lot of those characters, and I think the ones that you did see were in very like, they typically, actually, funny enough, just did a webinar about black representation in video games, and more specifically for black women around this time. If you saw sort of any of those black characters, they were in like beat 'em ups, fighting games, things of that sort. And about that time we maybe saw some in like GTA and things of that nature, but it was still very slim picking. So that was definitely the first one that I would say sort of really resonated with me and was like, she looks like me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely feel the sentiment around all of your answers, where sometimes it's incredibly difficult to see someone like you in a video game, whether it be from an indie company or, a AAA company. I will say that the first time that I saw a character that I felt like I could relate to was in Dead by Daylight, actually. So I play a lot of Dead by Daylight. Dynamic, I know you play a lot of Dead by Daylight too. Mia, Pika, yes. I know y'all dipped your feet in as well. Mm-hmm. I remember when they released Elodie and everyone was tagging me, and they were just like, because I've been a part of the community for such a long time, they were just like, Friskk, is that you? And when I saw her, I cried because, historically in video games, you don't see people of color. You don't see people from, different identities, marginalized groups, just in general. Like, you just don't. Even with customization options, you just never see, like, some games completely don't give you a color wheel, which is one of the most basic things you can place in a game, by the way. A color wheel is not a hard thing to place. And it's like, oh, I can be white or off-white, but I can't be, I can't be any sort of tan color, or I can't change my hair to be a fun color, or have locks, or maybe like an afro or something. Like, you don't see that very often. I think games are getting a lot better about putting those in. But when I saw Elodie, I was really surprised because I felt like I saw myself in a game that I truly enjoy and love. And, representation just in general it's incredibly important because it shapes how people like myself, like Mia, like Pika, like Dynamic are viewed in society. And, you know, when you see people like yourself in games, even in like entertainment, in you know, movies, it serves as like inspiration, and it's absolutely empowering. I can't really even describe how incredible it is to see someone like you in a different game. And like circling back, like for Mia, right? Being, you know, trans, like it's so, the representation still isn't there. Like when you were talking about the Tell Me Why character, his name is, it's Tyler, right? Tyler Ronan.
Yeah, I believe so.
So fun fact, Tyler is actually the first trans character in a AAA game title. And Tell Me Why came out in 2020. It's been 3 years. And that is the first AAA trans character. And it's unfortunate that, you know, bigger companies don't take more of a stance and more of an initiative to create that representation in games.
Yeah, I think for me, like circling back on the question as a whole, like if I have to identify with characters, it's more so always like the aspects of characters that are like me. Usually I'm identifying with we went through a list of like our favorite like female characters a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, and it was literally, I identified all of these characters like Aerith or Alex Chen and countless others. And I noticed the through line there is that they're all people with past trauma that have struggled and are potentially like, I'm not an orphan, but like who have like bad stuff that went down in their past. So I can definitely like relate to those aspects of characters, and that's kind of what I latch onto, because nobody's really telling like a trans story in most cases. So again, it is slim picking. So I literally take what I can get.
You know, I think that leads me to like my next question as we're talking about this, where it's like, what can the gaming space do to be more inclusive, to create that, you know, that representation that we want to see?
Don't get me wrong, there's been improvements, of course, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. And so many people, I think, view it from like only one lens, and that in itself is a problem, because so much of what we see sort of falls at the hands of, you know, more often than not, people that don't look like any of us. Just piggybacking what off of what you said, Friskk, is the fact that we need more funding towards indie studios that are, because, you know, I think you can probably ask anybody that's of any like marginalized identity, like who are the main entities behind the scenes that are actively creating these characters, and 9 times out of 10 it's the smaller studios with less funding. And you would think that with less resources, you know, you would sort of expect that from a, you know, entity that had more resources, when in reality it's the ones that typically have the less resources that portray these characters and portray this representation in a better way. So, you know, we need to put forth more money and more of those resources to the people that actually know what they're doing, that are putting in that effort. And even specifically like studios like of a specific demographic, like, you know, a Black studio or a woman only studio or a Indigenous studio. I remember when I did that webinar on, you know, Black representation in gaming, and, you know, when having to sort of address the concept and, you know, answer the question of like, hey, can you give us some games made by Black developers? And I was like,
Yep.
I had to string them together, and it's just so lackluster, and obviously that ties into, you know, we can always say like, okay, well there's not a lot of Black or Indigenous or Latin whatever developers, and even if that is the case in a lot of areas, the point is to give people the money and the resources to be able to get into these fields. Because as somebody that, you know, and this is obviously, I don't want to go off on a tangent because there's so much there's so much overlap and there's a lot of intersectionality that, is a part of this conversation. But, as somebody that went to a high school in the South, a predominantly Black high school, and recognizing how these schools are often, sort of last in line to get any sort of true, like, really just STEM, any sort of, because I think that, gaming could be considered as sort of a STEM-based field in a way. And I feel like you don't have enough of these like spaces that are sort of pushing for this, for women to, now you're seeing it more where you do have these pushes for women to get into tech and Black folks to get into tech and et cetera, et cetera. You definitely see that now. And, shout out to the folks that are coordinating those sorts of efforts. But, obviously we've, stuff takes time. Folks have to, learn about things, and folks need funding to be able to make these things happen. And then, as I had mentioned before, on the front side of things, the content creators, because we're the ones who make the content for these games. So we're kind of that first line of kind of defense when it comes to, promoting these forms of media. I don't think we realize a lot of the time how impactful we are. I can't even imagine how many people that I convinced to play Hades, Friskk, that you convinced people to play Dead by Daylight, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I can't even begin to think about just how many people have been impacted by the things that we have said and done. But so I feel like because of that, we need to have people more women that are like us, that are Black, that are Indigenous, that are Latin, that are trans, getting these opportunities to, sort of get those grow our platforms. And it's obviously not about numbers, it's about impact, of course, but in a lot of ways our impact is going to be limited when we don't have access to the same opportunities, resources, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have those opportunities to be put on those platforms with that megaphone to say these things and to do these things. And when you have the majority of the top content creators really on any platform that are typically, cishet white individuals, it's just, there needs to be change there as well, because we're sort of the directly facing group that faces the audience. So it's just a lot that needs to change really from, like I said, front to back. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there, but it's there's just, like I said, so much adjustment that needs to be made on so many different levels.
Piggybacking off what Pika said, I grew up, my mom's a teacher, so I spent most of my elementary school life at the same schools that she was at, which is predominantly Black schools. And then middle school, I obviously couldn't go to the same school as her. She's an elementary school teacher. So I went to an all Black middle school. And then when it came time for me to do high school, I went to the all white high school. And I was just shook at the difference in resources that those kids had compared to my middle school friends who were into the same things, just didn't have the same amount of resources. So it's really important that we get Black kids that are into STEM, different minorities that are into STEM, and that the industry rises to meet those people.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know, Mia, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
No, like to add on to the end of that, it's still so odd looking, even back at me growing up at school on my part, even at the segregation that you see between the genders of what people are encouraged to pursue. Like, even if you look at outside of tech, even if you look at sports, we didn't have like a girls basketball team. We had a boys basketball team. We had a girls netball team. Like, that segregation is just like so built in to society at like a ground level. And it's really about like trying to create these programs that combat that and get people into these positions where they can make where they are key decision makers, where they're actually influencing the content that is consumed. It's interesting, Pika, that you make the point about like content creators and our roles too. This mostly applies to like LGBTQI plus like Pride Month, but I was having conversations with like representatives, like community reps from a bunch of different industries and publishers and developers. And I was just trying to get the communicate the idea that you really want to be supporting content creators in a different way. Because a lot of the labor that you find during like months, like whether or not it's Women's History Month or Black History Month or Pride Month, a lot of the opportunities that come about for creators are, okay, can you do some free labor on our behalf? You know, do a charity stream or something for us, rather than actually giving them opportunities and supporting them and uplifting them in a way that would actually be beneficial to them. Because you find it's just like, say, if I was approached this month to do a charity for like a charity that benefits like a women's health center or something like that. Great cause, but again, potentially just taking money out of a community that is already affected by these things and then putting those dollars back into this charity, rather than trying to uplift and help people who might also be suffering at the same time. And again, this probably applies more to like queer people in general and queer charities, like taking money out of queer people's pockets. But I think it applies to like every single month there, is that we get like the 1 month per year for whatever it is, and then the rest of the year we're forgotten about, whether or not it's like Women's History Month or again Black History Month. It's a lot of it is just, okay, what points can this company score for that period of time, and then after that there's not a lot. It's nice to see programs that do run throughout the year, but they are seemingly like lesser in terms of few and far between, and they don't get the support that they need. It's nice to see stuff like, for instance, Twitch. They have the Women's Alliance, which is fantastic. But even so, it'd be great to see like more opportunities coming up just outside of the months that are supposed to be there for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's not just about supporting women only during, you know, the month of Women's History Month. It's not about supporting, you know, people who are Black during Black History Month only, you know, supporting people in the LGBT community only during Pride Month. It's about uplifting and recognizing those voices all year long.
There's a lot of trans women over the years that have come to me and said, me being a visible creator in the space is the reason that they managed to figure out who they are and accept themselves, what they are. Them telling me that I was the reason that they decided to be the person that they wanted to be, that always sticks with me.